I don't get it. I don't see how gays getting married would threaten my marriage. But here to educate me is Ryan Anderson, the author of What is Marriage? Man and Woman, a Defense. So, a defense? It sounds like you're feeling under attack.
I think the family's been under attack for the past 40 or 50 years, and it's not unique to the question of same-sex relationships. No-fault divorce, premarital sex, out-of-wedlock childbearing. There are a whole host of problems. I think what we need to recognize as people in favor of limited government is that the family is the heart of civil society, and you can't have limited government without strong civil society. So the government tries to encourage a man and a woman to commit to each other permanently and exclusively as husband and wife so that any children they create have a mother and a father.
And why can't government encourage two men or two women to do the same thing?
Well, it seems that once you get rid of the male-female aspect of marriage, you're left with no foundational reason for monogamy, exclusivity, or permanency.
What does one have to do with the other?
Well, the way that we got to the number 2 with monogamy, that it's one man and one woman who can unite in the type of act that can create new life, and every new life has one mother and one father. But once you say marriage is just about adult romance, marry the person you love, why not marry the people you love? And if marriage is just about adult romance, why should it be permanent rather than temporary? Once you take away from it the procreative aspect, that you're creating something that's generative.
But if you allow infertile people to marry and people who are too old to bear children to marry, so it's not just about childbearing.
It's not just about childbearing, but the fact of the matter is that every child is the product of the union of a man and a woman, and children do best when they're raised by the man and the woman who created them. And so government's interest here is really in protecting that child to one day grow up to be a self-sufficient, autonomous adult who's not relying on the state through welfare programs or...
But who's to say that two lesbians aren't going to do an even better job than a selfish man at raising a child?
Sure, we don't really have that many studies that would show one way or the other. What we do know is that every child deserves to have the man and the woman who created that child raise that child.
What about adopted children? What about people who get in vitro treatments? It has to be the man and woman who created that child?
We're not criminalizing any of these activities, but we don't want to incentivize any of these activities either. No one would suggest that we should just take children randomly from hospitals and assign them to parents. No, the ideal is that the mother and the father of that child take that child home. But when the mom and the dad are unable to do that, we recognize adoption as something that's necessary to make up for a lack. But no one would suggest that adoption is the ideal.
Do you have a problem with homosexuality itself? Is it a sin?
As a policy matter, I don't think that matters one way or the other. I mean, I think this is one of the interesting things about libertarians and conservatives. We can actually leave some of our moral convictions aside when considering what the public policy concerns are of the institution of marriage. What we're concerned about is when the baker or the florist or the photographer or the Christian adoption agency is coerced, penalized, shut down by the government for wanting to treat the union of a man and a woman, a marriage, in a way that's distinctive than the union of two men or two women. We've seen Catholic Charities adoption agencies forced out of finding homes for orphans because they wanted to find moms and dads for orphans. How is that live and let live?
Well, it's not, and libertarians would agree with you about that, not just for religious freedom, but if I open a business, I ought to get to serve anybody I want. And these headlines, judge orders a Colorado bakery, it must cater a same-sex wedding. I mean, I might boycott that bakery because I think they're narrow-minded, but if that's what they want to do, these other cases, a wedding photographer, florist, that's outrageous. And yet, when someone said they ought to have the right, the Arizona governor backed off. There's a new gay mafia policing America saying you can't even disagree with us.
It's amazing the thought crimes committed here. We should be able to voice our opinions without being penalized, especially by the government. If you think that photographer should take those pictures, you can not hire her to be your photographer. You don't have to have the government fine her.
Won't solve it here. Thank you, Ryan. Coming up, the Libertarian Conservative